Good morning, everyone. Today we are having Welcome Living with Low Vision. It's our series that we do about 4 times a year to give back to the community. And we're always looking for very interesting folks to interview that have low vision and they're doing amazing things. Today we're featuring Paige Miller. She's a law student at the University of Arizona in Tucson. And I was lucky enough to meet Paige in person. I was at a conference this year. I was at the BVA ACB conference, and Paige came up to the booth and said that she was using our product, which we'll talk more about during the process. And I asked her, was she using it for school or work? And she explained to me, and she had such an enthusiasm and such an interesting story to tell. And I just talked to her about, we do these webinars, and would you be interested in being part of this? And she said, yes. So I was really glad that she said yes. And here we are today. I had a wonderful opportunity to interview Paige a little fuller away from the show to get ready for today and just got to hear some really incredible stories. So she'll be able to share some of those today. So first of all, welcome, Paige.
Hi, thanks for the introduction.
You're welcome. So this picture is an interesting picture. It's you, I'm assuming, in the like a law library or a library in this section where there's a bunch of law books behind you. Can you kind of explain this picture a little bit to us?
Sure. Yeah, that is at my school as well, library. All the books that are behind me are like periodicals that have legal cases and just important information that are kind of like a typical library where they're codified in print. And um, I don't use those very often, but if I wanted to, I could use the Magna tab, which I used for school.
Excellent, excellent. So as we spoke when we met, when you first started going to college and you weren't like, oh man, I'm going to become a lawyer. I mean, I don't think that was like your initial how you jumped into everything. So can you kind of back up a little bit, talk about the story about, you got out of high school, when you were going to college, where you first started going, and then how it all kind of morphed into where you are today?
Yeah, so when I graduated from high school, I was on a very different career path. I was interested in journalism at the time, and so I went to college like specifically for that degree program. And kind of a caveat as I went to school during like COVID, like during the pandemic when it first started, and at that time, I was doing a lot of like broadcasting classes, which meant going out into the community, doing interviews, and then presenting that live, like either in a webinar kind of format like this or in like a radio type format. And that was incredibly tricky because unlike print journalism, like it was really nerve-wracking for me to go into the community like during the pandemic and kind of watch that industry changed so much, like just in a single semester. And so I ended up taking a variety of classes after that, which led me to do an internship in more like public policy and government. And I ended up working for a government agency that dealt with economic development in the Appalachian region, which is known as like a distressed area that has suffered a lot after the coal industry kind of moved away from the Appalachian Mountains. And so that agency was focused on economic development, but there was a lot of attorneys employed there who were focused on administering and approving contracts for economic development projects and also managing funding. And so I got talking to them and kind of through that internship realized like, oh, like this is a whole nother career path that I could take after college, still using a lot of the skills I learned in journalism, but just applying it in a broader way. So I decided to apply from there to law school during my senior year of college.
Wow. That's an amazing story. And then to be able to make that change and then go, oh, I'm going to switch to law school. So what has this done with your extending of your school? How many years did that add? And could you carry anything over or did you have to like start from scratch?
Well, actually, so I ended up changing my major, um, and I enrolled in a program that my school had at the time that was focused on kind of designing your own career path. And since I was already pretty much finished with the journalism core requirements for my degree, I didn't want to start a whole new bachelor's degree. So I ended up just adding a few classes in history, just to make sure that I was comfortable reading like for longer periods of time and doing those kind of analytical like assignments and class discussions. So I was able to graduate on time. And I did take a couple of summer classes during the COVID pandemic, but I didn't have to do any extra coursework, which was great.
That's good. So I did switch the slide. We're now on a slide where it says the talking points we're going to cover today, which we started to already cover the first point, which is Paige's background. And then we'll also just talk a little bit more about her inspiration to practice law, some of the accomplishments and challenges, because she's faced both, her need for self-advocacy. As I mentioned, she is using the MagLink tab for school. And then we'll also talk, of course, at the end about what's next for Paige. Paige, on this next slide, you're in a kind of like a mountainous area or field area and beautiful white mountains behind you. Can you talk about this picture a little bit?
Yeah, so it was interesting. After I graduated from college, or actually during my senior year, I was enrolled in a program that was like an honors program at the time, and they had a tradition where they invited the seniors to, it's called the Teton Science School in the Grand Teton National Park in Yellowstone. And they do like a leadership type conference for a variety of institutions, could be schools or could be like a work type trip. But they invited us to do a week long like hiking and leadership expedition where we got to hike the Teton Mountains, which for me was really cool. I'd always wanted to go to a national park, and outside of the one in Tucson, I hadn't been to any of the other national parks in the US. So I was grateful to go on that trip, and I never thought I'd be hiking up a mountain, but I did. So that was exciting.
Wow, beautiful. I've only had one opportunity to go. I didn't get to see the Grand Tetons. When you go to visit that park, it is a humongous park. You could literally stay there for weeks and keep exploring. And we only had so many hours, so I didn't get the opportunity to go see every part of it. But what a beautiful picture and what a neat story. Now, for hiking, did you use anything specific? Did you have a guide or how did that go?
Yeah, so I kind of actually was going, so there was several professors that went on this trip with us. And so I had told them ahead of time, like, this might take me a little bit longer, just an FYI, like, here's some areas that I might struggle in. And also, they had professional guides with us that did the programming. So I felt very comfortable with them. The only like part that was kind of crazy was it was snowing like in May. And so we were like hiking a few different times where the snow was like up to our knees and beyond. And so that was really hard to like navigate that. And so one thing I did was pack multiple pairs of sunglasses and a hat so that I could swap that out because the glare from the sun on the snow was crazy. Um, and so I made sure that I was super careful. And I also made sure that I was kind of like in the back of the pack. So if people wanted to like go around me, like they could, no shame. I'm not the most like athletic person, but um, I had several like very serious hikers with me on that trip, and they were always like super supportive. So it was a lot of fun.
Wow, it sounds like a lot of fun and just beautiful. And I can't imagine hiking with the snow up like that. I've skied and I've been in snow conditions like that before. And yeah, I basically put my skis back on and got out of where the deep, deep part was because it's a lot. It's a little bit kind of you keep thinking, when am I going to stop sinking? It's coming up further and further on me. So wow, what a neat trip. How long ago was that you did that trip?
Yeah, I did that after I graduated in 2022. So that would have been in May of that year.
Okay, very, very good. I changed slides one more time. This is Paige at Ohio University, and you're sitting in front of a cool statue area. It says Ohio University 1804, class gateway, and then it says religion, morality, and knowledge being necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind, schools, and the means of education shall forever be encouraged. That's really cool. It's an ordinance of 1787. So tell us a little bit about this picture and tell us a little bit about your time at Ohio University.
Yeah, so that picture, well, it was kind of funny. My senior year, I took an Ohio history class where I got to learn all about that ordinance and like the founding of the school. And that was just super fun and random. I didn't know like the extensive amount of Native American populations and also like the ice age that happened in Ohio of all places. So I thought that was super awesome. Aside from that, I really enjoyed my time at OU. I think it was a good fit for me because the school was a big school, but it was in a small town. So I felt like I would go out and be in the town of Athens and just like see people that I knew everywhere. And so I never felt like I was like alone at a big school. Um, and they also did this really cool thing for freshmen where they grouped us up into a small section of like 25 people or 30 people. And we took all our classes together. So that was a really great way to meet friends. And um, yeah, it was just, I love the journalism program. I already talked about my time doing, broadcasting and also working in government. Another fun fact is one summer I got to work at a zoo. That was really fun. I got to hang out with the animals all day, and I was in charge of like the marketing department intern type tasks. And so I got to write like social media content and like email content for donors, but also for, I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Philadelphia Eagles. So their mascot lives at the zoo that I worked at. And so I got to hang out with him, the Eagle. I think his name is Reggie, um, and write cool stuff. So, I mean, just really fun opportunities like that um, I had. Also, great friends that I made and great professors for sure. And even during COVID, I didn't feel alone at all. So,
Excellent.
yeah.
Well, now I'm a little envious of you. That actually, a lot of people don't know that about myself, but that would be my dream job is to work in a zoo. I love animals. I love to, every time I get to travel quite a bit for my job, and I try to visit zoos in as many places as I can. My husband and I were just on vacation in Sedona, Arizona, and there's a place called Out of Africa that's right 30 minutes out, 30 minutes to an hour, depending on where you're at in Sedona. And we got to go be with the animals, and we paid extra to get some backstage information about them and stuff. And it was really cool. So that's very cool. That's awesome. Um, Sounds like you're young, but as I think I told you, I feel like you're an old soul. You've accomplished a lot in a short amount of time. So that's really cool. I love this picture. The next picture is of Paige and her parents. So I don't know if you're at school and they came up to visit you, or can you share a little bit more about this picture?
Yeah, so actually I lived in Texas for a little bit and it was the very last weekend that I was living there and my parents came out to help me move to Arizona and we um all just went out to a nice meal and just kind of celebrated going on to law school and we kind of walked through some of the neighborhoods that I lived in at the time. So it was great, but it was very hot. My parents did not like it. I was like, I'm used to this by now, but so that was just super fun.
That's cool. Yeah, it is hot, and you guys, at least your dad's got some shorts on, and you and your mom have something on that hopefully is a little cooler. So I want to kind of, and I didn't even tell you I was going to ask about this, but I've been fortunate enough. I've been doing my career. I think it's my 38th year actually, which dates how old that I am, but for quite some time. And so I've got some of my best friends here in Las Vegas where I live are legally blind. And I always like to ask the question because of my friends that I've met here. One of them, her mom was just the best advocate, and she enrolled her in basically regular classes, regular school, and they just did IEPs and they got her the assistance she needed. And then the other one that I'm super close with as well didn't have that experience. Her mom kind of, oh my gosh, you're blind, you or you're losing more vision. Now she's totally blind. You can't go out and do things on your own. We don't want to give you scissors. You might cut yourself. All those kind of different things. I know all parents are just doing the best. I now have a child and grandchildren, and I understand that. You want to protect them. There's that fine line between trying to have them be successful on their own, but also you care so much about your kids. So kind of what was your experience growing up? And well, first of all, let's back up way back. Let's talk about your vision loss. Um, have you had it since birth, or when did you have that happen? And has your vision changed? And then kind of your interaction with your parents, because I mean, you're like off doing some pretty incredible things. So you had to have had some, to me, some parents that supported that earlier on, for you to be so well-rounded. So lots of questions in one there, but let's start with your vision first.
Yeah, okay. So we kind of talked about this. Well, I think it's actually in the advertisement, but so I was born prematurely, which was kind of a surprise to my parents. They like were not expecting that at all. I mean, I don't know who was expecting that, but I know sometimes parents are sometimes warned that that may be a possibility, but for mine, it wasn't. Um, and so, because of that, I was diagnosed with retinopathy of prematurity, which is something that not every single like person that's born prematurely has that, but it can be a complication of it depending on like risk factors and whatnot. So essentially, that affects the retinas of your eyes. So for me, that meant that I had um, one of my retinas detached, unfortunately, and then the other one luckily like started to, but they were able to like fix that, or like I had surgery to fix that. And I, as a side effect from that, also had cataracts in that eye, so super fun. um and then on my other eye, I, since my retina detached, like I don't have any vision in that eye, and I actually went through the process to get that removed. So I just have a prosthetic now, which I think was super helpful. Although I thought I'd mention that because even in the like low vision and blindness community, I don't think that's super common. I only know like one other person that's had that surgery. So um, I don't know. I'm always down to talk to people about that because I think it's obviously a decision-making process for sure. Um, and then luckily for me, like after all that, I luckily like haven't really had my vision change too much beyond that. So obviously I'm very thankful. But that's like a super like quick um rundown, I guess you could call it, of my own vision loss journey. I would say I got very lucky though, because my parents were very on top of it in terms of making sure that I, had access to, good doctors and teachers. And I got very lucky. I had the same teachers pretty much all the way through. Like I had them since the time I did early intervention all the way until I graduated. So I'm really thankful that I had that because I got to know them very well. Um, And same thing of having the same doctor all the way through. So, I mean, I just got very lucky in that regard. I think my parents like pushed for that to make sure um, that I had access to those things. And I think they were very much just encouraging me to go and do things. Like I did different sports growing up. My parents were always like dropping me off at my grandparents' house and being like, just hang out here for a week. Like we want you to get used to traveling and being away from home and exploring. I went on several school trips in high school. Like my friends and I got to go to Canada one year, and I think my parents really encouraged just that level of independence. And so when I wanted to go to OU, they really weren't. I mean, of course, they were like, oh my gosh, you're moving like 8 hours away from home. But I think they quickly were like, yeah, this is a good decision for you. And they encouraged that to have me go be independent and um, have those experiences. So can't thank them enough for that.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
amazing. Well, I mean, you can tell. I mean, you wouldn't be the person that you are today without all the independence behind you. Because again, it's, I get asked an interesting question, and I do think it's an interesting question. But, my career path has been mainly with low vision and blind individuals, a little bit, some hard of hearing and deaf, and it's been a combination, but mainly low vision and blind. And so people that in my family or people that are just getting to know me, well, what's a visually impaired person like, or what's a blind person like? And my comment is, and I truly believe this, they're just like you and I, they're people. There's some visually impaired people that are very capable and very out there just doing whatever, nothing's going to stop them. And there's some that are, oh, I can't do this because I'm low vision. But you know what? I know a lot of sighted people that think they can't do things, or they've put limitations or different things on themselves. So I always just try to say they're people. They're wonderful people, and they all have unique gifts, just like we all have unique gifts. And it's not fair, I don't feel, to put a low vision person or a blind person in a box and say, well, they're blind, they can't do this, or they're low vision. And I'm not talking about silly things. Oh, well, they're not silly, but like, and I know there's self-driving cars and things are happening, but years ago when I started this, that wasn't a thing. And of course, a blind person is not going to be out driving right now. I mean, that's, what are they going to do? Fill the speed bumps along the way? I mean, of course, within reason. But there's so many things they can do. And now we're also seeing some with the change of technology and the change of everything, really. It's changed so much since I started in this industry. Really, you can do it. Anything and everything you want. Set your sights high, whatever it is you want to do. And so I was really excited to interview you because you are out doing some pretty amazing things, whether you're low vision or not. I don't know too many people that just want to jump in and become a lawyer. That's a big deal, Paige. I'm not sure how proud you should be of yourself, and I'm sure your parents are so proud of you. But that's a big task. Has nothing to do with vision or not vision. That's a big goal that you set for yourself. So kudos to your parents, but kudos to you for jumping in there and just realizing that you can do anything you put your mind to. You should be so proud of yourself.
thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I want to give my dad here a shout out too. And he was always very encouraging me, especially, I'll get into this later, but throughout my law school journey and my mom too. But I know that my dad, if he could do it again, that he sometimes wishes that he would have done law school as well if he had the opportunity to. And so I think having someone that's so interested in, like last semester, for example, I was taking criminal procedure and it was a closed book exam. So that meant for me like memorizing. And so as a way of studying, for example, I would just go over my outline with him and be like, hey, like what's, exceptions to the Fourth Amendment, like searches and seizures. And he was just, we enjoyed doing that together. And we would often, talk about true crime TV shows and things like that. And I think having parents that are just interested in the career path and supportive in that way is super helpful. And I want to give a shout out to my mom as well, because I took an internship this past summer, I didn't realize how far it was from where I was living. It was actually like an hour commute for both of us. And so we would be driving to the courthouse every day. And so that's like a big undertaking and just shows, I think, the support from both of them for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree with you. Big shout out to both of them. What do you think is the most challenging thing that you've ever accomplished?
I think the most challenging thing that I've accomplished, I think learning to advocate for myself in um adversity, I'd say, like adverse situations was very difficult. I think also like I also took the time I in high school or actually all through school I learned Braille. So that was, of course, a challenge. But then I decided to change it up and learn JAWS like before I attended school. And I think having to like change up my learning style and kind of assess like how am I gonna, study and retain the material in the way that's going to be the most accessible for me and help me like keep up with the demands of a law program. Like that was really hard. I think assessing those things for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Those sound like to be very, very challenging. And you brought up self-advocacy, and I think that that's a big thing. So, kind of let's talk about that for a minute. What happened, or what situations can you kind of tell people about some self-advocacy situations? And before you do that, you mentioned JAWS, and I just want to mention because some people that tune into this maybe don't know all the assistive technology. But JAWS is a screen reading program. So Paige has the ability to go on a website or use anything on the computer and it will read the content. Now, that's if it's created properly. There are things called alt tags that if they're not there for pictures, then JAWS can't do that. But it's an amazing screen reading software program. It's been around for many of years, and it's great. I know it. I trained with it for many years as well. So, but that's a daunting thing within itself. Learning a screen reading program well is a process within itself. Learning Braille, I've attempted to learn Braille a couple times, and what I found with it is I would have to really use it on a regular basis. You know, of course I cheat. I just look at something and don't have to use it. So I was able to get better at a screen reader because I just turned the monitor off and I forced myself to learn it. But for learning Braille, I just never was able to really get in there and get comfortable with it. So, so let's kind of talk about self-advocacy a little bit more because I think it's important. And I think, yes, if you're visually impaired, you need it for certain things. But I think just us as humans, we need to self-advocate. We need to, say, hey, that doesn't work for me, or can we do this another way? Or we have to be confident enough, respectful, of course, but confident enough to self-advocate. And it's that in itself takes some chutzpah. That takes some saying, oh, I'm okay to do this. So can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think just in general, it's hard, and I know we're probably gonna get into this later of, having to advocate in a professional setting is hard. I think there's no doubt about that. I think um for me, like a lesson that I kind of learned through this process, just as a general statement, is I think that like you know yourself the best and you know what your needs are and if someone is suggesting something to you that might not be the most helpful. I think you have a right to say, hey, like this isn't the best idea. Like, can I try something else? Or like, I think you kind of know what's going to work for you. And I think it can be really hard sometimes, especially in a professional setting, if there is people that, either they're sighted people or there's a power dynamic at play, it can be hard to suggest those things. Um, and I think that was kind of a learning lesson for me. It's just knowing what was going to make me the most successful and going after that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I did change the slide one more time, and this says Paige's MagnaLink tab set up for that she uses for school. This is a picture she sent to us, and it has a picture of a product called the MagnaLink tab. And there is a camera on it called a distance camera, and that camera can do document viewing. It can also do distance viewing. So if Paige is in a classroom environment, needs to look across the room, the camera would be able to magnify what's on the board, or if someone's doing a presentation, it could magnify that. It also can do self-viewing. So if Paige needs to brush her hair or do any self-grooming, it does that as well. Now, Paige has it very uniquely set up. She has it, it's the unit itself is a Surface Pro tablet. So anybody that has a Surface Pro tablet, there's nothing special about this. There's nothing been adapted or changed to meaning that, we didn't change the size or change anything. It's running Windows. So that's why she's able to have JAWS on this because it is a Windows-based PC. So it's just a Surface Pro tablet. And then it's in a stand. So that's the only adaptation is the stand and the camera, the distance camera. And then it has special software. And that software works in conjunction with that. But then she has it plugged into a larger monitor because Surface Pro tablets, depending on when you purchase them, they either have a 12.3 or a 13-inch screen. And that's just not very large for somebody that has visual impairments. So she has it plugged into a larger monitor, and then the picture shows the camera over a book and it's magnified in that software, and then it's magnified even larger because it's actually projecting. I don't know, I'm guessing maybe that's a 17-inch monitor. She can tell us more in a minute. So tell us, like on the daily basis for school, what's kind of your procedure? Do you take your tab to class and then you bring it home or to your back to your area where you work and plug it into a larger monitor? Can you kind of walk us through a day for you and what's that like?
Yeah, so luckily, my law school is very good about getting books that are compatible with JAWS. So I actually don't use physical books unless it's something I've purchased on my own. That could be practice questions or additional studying material. So I have a Lenovo laptop, which is great with JAWS because it's so powerful, and I take that to class. However, during the first year, I felt like I wanted to have my notes pulled up on one screen and then have a second screen for the book to be pulled up in case I felt like skimming material during class, which I often did before cold call. Which, if you're not familiar with law school, is when a professor asks you to summarize the case and the reasoning behind it in front of the class, which is a little stressful. Um, Hence why I would bring the tab. So what I would do is I would take the tab out of its like stand, and I would take that as a standalone, which was great because it's a little bit more portable that way. And I could still use the software, but I could use it without the distance viewing camera. So it was very flexible. Um, and then when I would get home, I would plug it back into that kind of desktop setup and use it with, like I said, practice questions or anything additional that I felt like would be helpful. I did have an online class this year, which I would use the tab as a second monitor because that was required for the class. And it was great because as a JAWS Infusion user, that software isn't great with the dual monitor. And so having the tab as a whole standalone setup was so much more cohesive for what I needed to be using it for. So that was great. And yeah, that's kind of my like day to day. That definitely will change though when I start doing more internships, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but how I'll use that in the workplace.
Excellent. So first of all, my big question, because I don't even know if I asked you this before, but how did you find out about the tab? And did you get to try it before you ended up getting it? Or how did you know it was going to meet your needs? And how did you even know what it was and where to get it?
Yeah, so it was actually interesting. When I was living in Texas, I found out about it, and it was interesting because I like obviously went to school in Ohio and on the East Coast where I grew up, and I felt like for whatever reason, like the LVI products just weren't known very well. And when I was in high school, I mean, they weren't even out yet as far as the tab because I graduated before a lot of the newer products came out. So, yeah, I found out about it when I was in Texas. I did try it when I was working with OVR to purchase it. And I was like, this could be really great because if I wanted to use a physical book, if my books were delayed or something along those lines, or if I was in a workplace and had a printed document, I could easily use that. And that was kind of the selling point to me, um, of how I knew about it. And yeah.
That's great. That's interesting and that's great. And I like all the different ways that you figured out you're really creative and good at I would say when I have grandkids that are 6, 8, and 9, and I don't like the I can't, that I can't really and you're really good at never what I would call falling into victim or falling like I can't do this. You always like, let me come up with a way. And really, you're using the device in several different ways for different reasons. And so you've really taken a device that was created with one goal in mind and you've kind of turned it into three and that kind of just goes along with your great personality of thinking out of the box and I think that that's really really cool. Oh, we're going to come back to the fun fact. We're not ready to
Yes.
do that one yet because that's a story within itself. So one of the next questions I wanted to ask you is if you could share some helpful advice with a person with low vision, what would it be? I mean, you've experienced a lot in life, but if you had somebody on here, because we do get people that it's really exciting to me, excuse me, after we have this, they'll write and say, I was thinking I can't do X, Y, and Z. And it might not be law school, it might be nursing school, or it might be something different, but they'll go, look at Paige took this, and this and figured out how to do it. So I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I know I can figure it out because I have hope because Paige did this. So what would be some helpful advice that you would give a person that has low vision?
Yeah, so I guess to kind of back up, I really didn't talk about law school too much, like as a career path, and I think I can kind of address that within this question.
Sure.
So for me, I think so. I guess to back up a bit, I'll answer this in a second, but I when I applied to law schools, I ended up having to go through the process twice, essentially, because I went to a school that unfortunately I was hoping to get accommodations and it wasn't a good fit. And so I ended up being more so of a transfer type student where I essentially started over, but not without advocating for myself a lot first to make that process smooth and saying that, yeah, I'd love to start over, but I want to do it as a first year student all over again and be eligible for, financial aid. And I know that, for example, being a transfer student is a lot more difficult in the graduate student landscape than it is in undergrad. Um, and so that's kind of why, after advocating for myself, I said I would really like to start over as a first year. And that whole process was a story in itself. However, I think advice that I would give is if you're going on a career path, and you are low vision, I mean, there's organizations like the ACB and the NFB, LVI, of course, and other great organizations that have people that are in those fields. And I think the way that I kind of turned my whole experience around while applying the second time was I made sure to build community the second time, of going up to people that I thought looked like they knew and had experience in my field and say, like, I'd love to talk to you about my experiences, what I could do differently next time, what I should be looking for in a program, um, and those sorts of things. And that kind of helped me eventually build more community, meet some great friends, and also now I have the opportunity where a friend and I have kind of teamed up because we both had experiences where we felt like our schools could be improved in helping low vision or blind lost students. And so now we're together with another organization hoping to create programming to address those needs and also help students be more successful, and not be like us who, didn't know what we were doing, like going through this process the first time, especially, being a first generation college student. It made it a lot more difficult. So to summarize it, I would just say look for people, reach out online, and just build community. And I think you'll surprise yourself by the amount of information you'll pick up.
That is such a great answer. I mean, you said maybe do it more successful. To me, in my mind, you're so successful because you kept going. And yes, maybe you took some turns in different things, and you mentioned some really good things. My niece actually was a first generation college, and my it's my obviously my sister's daughter, and my sister and her husband didn't go to college, and there's three kids in the family. She's the only one that went, and I didn't even know this was a thing, but it was such a big thing for her because it was new for her, and she learned so much that she actually went to school and got a degree, and she works at a university where they have whole departments. I mean, this was like so incredible to me, that just work with students that are first gen, that are just like, that's a thing. I'm like, I didn't even know that was a thing. And so she was so impressed by the help and the different things that she learned and went through. Now she's now giving back to that community, and that's what she took on for her profession. And now she's helping first gen students. And that's kind of like what you're doing. You're out there, you experience, it wasn't maybe, there wasn't a path, there wasn't all this, you figured it out, and now you've put together this and you're giving back to the community. I mean, that's incredible. And that's great. And it takes a village, as we know, to have things work, but you have to be willing to ask questions, and you have to be willing sometimes, like you said, to start over. And
Yes, and I would
there's
definitely like to
nothing
give a
wrong with
shout
that.
out to the U of A, University of Arizona. I think they've been welcoming to me. Like, I just didn't know what to expect starting over. And luckily, I just have had such a great experience with them. And I didn't feel like, it was so nerve-wracking, like starting over. I just felt like, oh, I'm doing this all for the first time. So I think that was great in itself, that they were just open and welcoming.
That's great. I mean, my next question, but you've kind of answered it. But I mean, if you want to add more to it, that would be good. But my question was going to be, for who and what are you most thankful for? And you've given some great shout outs to your parents and now the university. But do you have more you want to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely think I'm just super grateful. Like I said, my parents, my teachers that I've had in the past. I also want to give a shout out to just some friends that I've made in this community. Like, actually, the ACB has a chapter for attorneys, and the people that I've met through that specifically have been super helpful, as well as an alumni of the U of A Law who, um, I'll get into this more in the what's next conversation, but who kind of was advocating with me throughout this whole journey. And I just, I think alumni that are willing to step up and kind of show you the ropes, like that's invaluable. Um, and so I'm just thankful for people that have, I guess, come before me and are helping me out, because I know that as an attorney, it's very busy. And so anyone who takes the time out of their day, I think is great. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. I agree with you. You know, you're in a profession that is demanding, but someone helped them at one time and they're giving back. And that's what you are going to be. Well, you already are in a position to do that, but you'll be in even more of a position to do that. And that's so great. That's just awesome. Um, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but do you think you have a most rewarding thing that you've accomplished? You've accomplished a lot of things and a lot of really cool things, but you have one thing that just sticks out that you think is the most rewarding?
This is a hard question. I think for me, I guess one of the most rewarding things that I've gotten to do, like I said, I talked about this in the very beginning, working for the government agency. I felt like it was really rewarding just to hear people's stories that were trying to better themselves within their community. And I think there's kind of a narrative that goes on in the Appalachian region that people are like, oh, like we're going to have to move elsewhere to like invest in ourselves or grow our careers. And I think getting to hear people's stories that didn't do that and were like, no, I'm going to stay in my community and use funding from this organization to build something that is going to give back to my community and invest in myself, I think was super rewarding to kind of watch people breaking like generational stereotypes.
That's it's interesting you said that because I just came back from vacation and we had a 4.5 hour ride up and a 4.5 hour ride back. I'm not a person that reads a lot of books. I do have a very crazy, intense schedule, but there's books I want to read. And someone had told me about JD Vance's there's a movie, I guess, as well, but a book about his life. And I'm not talking about political views here because whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, or you don't care, that has nothing to do with this. The story of his life, he talked about generational areas where he lived and the demographics and how people in that area maybe grew up as more of a it's called I think hillbilly elegy I think it's called is a very unique name, but he talked about the stereotypes and the people that grew up in those areas and how they had such pride in the flag and such pride if a hearse went down the street, whether they knew the people or not, they all stopped and got out of their cars and gave respect for that and how important it was. Maybe they were dirt poor, but how important that community was and is still to him this day to go and help a generation of people. And you kind of have talked about that with where you're the Appalachian people. Some people just said, I can't be successful. I have to get out of here. And some people said, no, I'm going to be successful and then give back to that community. And he just talks about different areas and it kind of ties into what you just said. And I really didn't even had never thought in my head at all about, of course I knew there's, Southern people and people in Texas and those type of things, but I never knew about these generational areas and about what you just mentioned. I learned so much from that listening to his story. So thank you for sharing that.
Definitely.
You are doing some really cool things and tell us a little bit about where you're at, what's next, like when you're gonna be finished, which you'll never be finished because I can tell education and you're always going to learn more with law, but kind of like where you're at, what's next, and what is your next big adventure?
Yeah, so as far as what's next, so after the semester, in the spring, I am so after you finish a certain amount of semesters in law school, you can become what's called a certified intern, which essentially you are allowed to do limited court appearances with an attorney present, and you get to do hearings and things like that, depending on the practice area. And so I mentioned this alumni just now, but she graduated from the U of A. She's completely blind. She owns her own practice in Tucson. Um, and so we are I'm going to intern for her for credit next semester and get to go to court with her. And we're just going to be like showing up all the sighted people because it's going to be a fun team of both of us. And I think what's so fun is she does family law primarily. So I'm taking that class this semester. And so getting to put that into practice and also learn tips and tricks from her is going to be very valuable to my own learning experience. And also just being in a firm, I think, is something that I am excited to do. Like this past summer, I was in a government agency, which was great, but I definitely realized I wanted to see what private practice was like. So that's, um, yeah, that's kind of my upcoming thing. And I guess too, I should mention I have another after this spring, I'll have one more year of classes. So I hope to graduate in 2026 at some point.
Well, I know you're not expecting to hear this either, but I want to be invited to your graduation. I'm so proud of you, and I just think what you're doing is so cool, and it's amazing. I don't even know hardly any attorneys, in my family or friends or anything, so I'm just enthralled with what you're doing. And then the few that I do know have talked to me about how daunting the educational process was, coming and taking their test at the end. I know one person that has failed that test three times, still has not passed. So I understand how intense that the educational process is, and I have immense respect for people that are choosing that profession. It's definitely not the easy way to go. So kudos to you. I
Thank you.
it's just amazing. I want to go to that fun fact, but Lizzie, I can tell that there's some things in the chat. I can't see them because I'd have to get out of the screen I'm in. Could
Yep,
you,
I didn't want to interrupt at all.
yeah, can you share some of the questions or ask the questions, please?
Well, the first one was how you chose Ohio. Let's see, Vanessa is from Ohio and lives in Wyoming. So she said that's an interesting parallel.
So then, Paige, how did you find yourself getting to Ohio? How did that happen?
Um, so I knew that when I graduated that I wanted to do journalism, and so it's kind of tricky to find programming, like find a full degree that's dedicated just to journalism and not like a very broad degree. And so I kind of did some research ahead of time and just was looking at programs. And my sister actually graduated from Bowling Green for a degree program. And so I was like, oh, that's another Ohio school, Bowling Green. And so I kind of just knew like her experience there was great. And so I was like, yeah, let me try like Ohio and just see what this is about. And I kind of that was kind of the tipping point for me. And once I saw the campus too, it's a beautiful um all brick campus everywhere. And so it's just I was like, yeah, I'm definitely hooked on the just the pride and the vibes on campus as well.
Awesome. Okay, I think there's a few other questions.
Well, the next one just says, "You're okay, you got this," from Marie. And then uh, Kelly asked if you would be interested in becoming a guest speaker for her peer support group that she runs.
Yeah, that sounds great. Actually, this semester, actually, this past year and last year, I have had the chance to give back to my undergrad school with a program that I did the Teton trip through. They bring back alumni every fall semester, and we are paired with a current student. And so I served as a peer mentor and had a lot of fun with the students these 2 years. And so I definitely think I have some experience and would be happy. I think my contact information is actually on the next couple of slides, but definitely reach out to me.
It is. It is. Is there more questions before I go to the great kitty cat story?
Nope, not that
Okay.
I see.
All right. So we have this down as fun fact, and this was like the end of our conversation when we talked last time. So tell us the pictures of what we're seeing here and share with us the fun fact.
Yeah, so there's two photos. The one on the left is Sadie. She definitely has she has kind of brown eyes, I would say. Um, and I'll get back to her later. And then Sophie is on the right, and she's the one that's sitting in a pile of dirt, which is on brand for her. She loves exploring. And she often will come in from like the basement or the garage of my parents' house, like covered in cobwebs or dirt or anything. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, please don't. So, the two of them are sisters, and kind of the fun story about them is they, I went to an adoption day with my family and they were both like there was like a row of cages of cats, and they were kind of in the middle. And so my family and I kept like walking back and forth, kind of looking at the cats, like talking to different people. And every time we walked by, the cat on the left, Sadie, just kept like meowing really obnoxiously and like putting her paws like through the cage. And after a couple of times of this happening, we were like, okay, she's only doing this to like us, like no one else. And so we were like, yeah, that's a sign that we definitely are going to. We ended up adopting both of them, obviously, and um, so a couple months later, we found out that we were like, oh, like Sadie's not like, she kind of like cocks her head kind of weird when she's looking at us, and she doesn't really like play as much as Sophie does. And so we found out later that she actually is visually impaired. So we didn't know that when we um, adopted them. Sophie is not. As you can tell by the picture, her eyes are like really wide, like she knows she's about to get in trouble. Um, but yeah,
Hmm.
so that's kind of the fun fact is it's been really interesting kind of watching the two of them together because Sophie often likes to chase Sadie around the house, and Sadie 99% of the time loves that, and 1%, it ends up in a cat fight. But they are a ton of fun, and it's been amazing. I think Sadie, because she can't see very well, she loves, especially my mom, to sit on people's laps and just kind of wrap her paws around your shoulder. And she kind of is like giving us a hug. So it's very cute. And yeah, that's my fun fact.
That's really cool. That's a really cool story. And that she reached out, she knew they're going to get me. They're going to understand. I'm visually impaired too. Help me. Get me out of this cage.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
so
So
cool.
we definitely joke that she picked us, not the other way around.
Oh,
And
I love
yes.
it. I love it. Cool. Did anything else pop up? I thought I saw one of the things change to another number.
She just said thank you.
Okay, very good. So this is Paige's contact information. She's been so gracious and willing to give this out. So her email address is Paige. It's Paige, and then her last name. Excuse me, Paige, and then C, then Miller. So Paigec Miller, Miller, the number six at gmail.com. So one more time, Paige, Paigec Miller, the number six at gmail.com. And then the picture that's here, it was the opening picture of Paige with all the law books behind her. All right, we're going to move on to the next slide. Next month, this is kind of special. We don't usually do this many Living with Low Vision series together. We just have had a slew of super interesting folks come through. And also, we didn't want to turn this one down at this time because he's getting ready for a big race. So I wanted him to come and talk before he continues with his big race. So our next one is January 7th, and we kind of changed it up a little bit. It's living with low/no vision because Speedy Turtle, Dave Wilkinson, is totally blind. And he's an endurance athlete, but he's actually joining a race called Race Across America. You can actually follow Speedy Turtle. He has a place, he has a website. And I'm personally involved and excited about having Speedy Turtle on because my son is doing Race Across America. He's a disabled veteran, and he only has people that are uniquely abled on his team, whether that's you've been injured in the military and you can't use your legs and only use your arms, and or he has two blind people on the team as well. I think there's seven of them in their team. So we're excited to interview Speedy Turtle, and you can go to his website, just type in Speedy Turtle, it'll come up. but you can also register now for that webinar on January 7th. So we hope you join us for that. Our contact information, if you need to reach out to me or to Lizzie, I'm Kimberly Klein. It's kimberly.klein@lviamerica.com. It's 702-468-6611. You can also reach out to Elizabeth Harris, and it's her email is Elizabeth, ELIZABETH.Harris@lviamerica.com. And you can phone her at 423-822-8660.